Hello everyone, welcome back to the Pop Pod. I am Pop Sam Cam. Beyoncé has kicked off her Cowboy Carter tour officially, so I thought it would be a good time to rank all of her albums. That is going to be coming up in the podcast, but as always, if you're loving this podcast, I would love it if you would follow or subscribe and also rate 5 stars if you feel that way about it. If you feel 4 stars, do that as well. Anything under that, keep it to yourself. You can also join the Discord. I'll drop the notes for the Discord down below in the show notes. I will drop the link rather down below in the show notes. If you want to come and talk with a lot of other like-minded people about pop music, revolving around the podcast, share your thoughts on new music with me, we can do all that in the Discord. Otherwise, just sit back and enjoy, and let's get into what's been happening. The first bit of news I want to share with you today is that Chappell Roan has signed a new management contract. She left her management at the end of last year, and we were kind of wondering about where she would go with this because that's quite a big move to make while her career is skyrocketing. She's landed with Foundations Music, which is the management company that also has Noah Kahan, LaVey, and also Rebecca Black. Next up, Lana Del Rey headlined Stagecoach over the weekend with a country music set that she used to debut new music off her forthcoming, yet-to-be-titled album, and it was kind of a wild ride. I mean, this set was very interesting. I watched it from start to finish on the live stream. The new songs, the first one was a dedication to her husband of mine. The second one was a song called 57.5, which is named after the amount of millions of Spotify listeners she has monthly on that app. And she also used that song to reveal to everybody that she kissed Morgan Wallen.
I kissed Morgan Wallen. I guess kissing me kind of went to his head. If you want my secret to success, I suggest don't go ATVing with him when you're out west.
Then there was a much gentler song called Quiet in the South, which she also debuted. I think that these songs are all very exciting. She debuted them alongside Henry Come On and Bluebird, the current single from the album, and also gave us some country renditions of songs like Summertime Sadness, and I think it worked. She seemed to be more comfortable and happy to be on this much smaller stage. Well, not much smaller, but smaller than the main stage of Coachella last year. She seemed to be way more comfortable up there, and I think was just kind of having the time of her life doing this set, which was really cool to see. Next piece of news, Haim are heading out on the road for a tour in support of I Quit.
Relationships, what's all this talk about relationships?
I think it's kind of branded as a world tour, but it's just the US and the UK. At this point, they are due to kick that one off in June. Madison Beer has announced that she has a new album coming out this year. Obviously, Madison has had a pretty good couple years. She was nominated for a Grammy earlier in the year. She didn't win it, but she was nominated. And I think that her second record did pretty well for her, but I feel like there is plenty of hype building for Madison. And she's revealed to Cosmopolitan that that album will be out by the end of the year, which I think is very exciting. Finally, Doechie's What It Is was originally written for Normani, according to the songwriter Blush.
What it is, ho, what's up? Every good girl needs a little thug.
So What It Is was basically Doechie's first breakthrough single, I guess, before it all started really happening for her this year. It got plenty of play at pop radio and also urban radio and ended up shooting her into the Billboard Hot 100. But now Blush has revealed that it was originally pitched to Normani. However, Normani felt that it was something that didn't fit her vision. That is interesting to me because I feel like that could have been a great single for Normani, but I don't know if Normani's team or her have always been making the right decisions. I thought that Dopamine was a great record, but it wasn't really promoted properly and now is just totally forgotten almost. So maybe a song like What It Is what she needed to boost her into the charts. We will never know. Doechii took it and did an incredible job with it. So there's that. Over on the charts, Alex Warren, Ordinary on the Billboard Hot 100 is up to number 3. This is one of the biggest hits in the world right now. I don't know if you saw the video over the weekend at Stagecoach of Lana Del Rey basically singing at him and telling him how much of a fan she was of this song.
Yeah, every time I hear that, I think, why can't we hear more like this? Yeah, because it takes you to church, yeah.
It is taking over everywhere. I'm personally not the hugest fan. It's, to borrow a term of his own, ordinary, but it is doing incredibly well and just continues to rise on the Billboard Hot 100. One that I'm not so happy about is Post Malone and Morgan Wallen have debuted at number 8 with their new song, I Ain't Coming Back. That is obviously the follow-up to last year's I Had Some Help, which ended up being a number 1 single for them. This one is off Morgan Wallen's album. The last one was off Post Malone's album. Sure. And finally, I don't know if you've been following what's been going on with Lorde and her new single, What Was That? But it continues to do well on the streaming charts. Over the weekend, it actually got to number 1 on the US Spotify charts, which was her first number 1 on that chart since Royals 11 years ago. It's now at number 5, but she's also on par currently for a top 40 debut on the Billboard Hot 100. That would be her highest positioning since Greenlight. Solar Power debuted, I think, at number 64 on the charts. So this is an improvement on that. And it seems to be a very good era for her so far. Let's get into the main part of the podcast. Beyoncé kicked off her Cowboy Carter Stadium tour overnight. It follows on from the Renaissance tour, which came in the summer of 2023. And I know that there's been a lot of press about this, some about the tickets not selling. That remains to be seen, but there's plenty of hype still surrounding this tour. And a lot of you have been asking me to rank the Beyoncé albums definitively. I've actually done this a couple of times on TikTok, and I find that it always changes depending on my mood. So I've sat down and I've really tried to nut out her 8 albums in order and take into account how I felt about them throughout their whole lifespan. So of all the lists I've made of Beyoncé albums, I think that this one is my most definitive, and I will tell you why as we move through them all, starting at number 8 with I Am Sasha Fierce. This one is my least favorite Beyoncé album and probably the easiest rank of the whole thing. It's not that I hate this album, it's just that it's the only time I feel like in Beyoncé's career where she really played for the charts and felt the pressure of what was going on in the mainstream. At this time, we had somebody like Lady Gaga who was doing very weird avant-garde stuff, and there was also a lot of character-based alter ego-esque pop work coming out everywhere. It was all about like which pop star could have the more shocking tactic. And this album's obviously split into 2. You get the more kind of raw Beyoncé half, and then you get the Sasha Fierce half, which is the more eclectic, experimental, dance, electronic sort of side. And I just feel on both sides, actually, that with the singles in particular, she really plays to radio. And I don't know if we really get the most authentic version of Beyoncé across the whole thing, which is funny. I mean, particularly given the Sasha Fierce alter ego, I felt like that came off as a little gimmicky in the end, because as we've seen on so many other records throughout her career, the blending of Beyoncé as this authentic, stripped back person with the alter ego and the seamless melding of those two things is what makes Beyoncé Beyoncé and so incredible. So to pull them apart, it feels like something is missing on both of the sides. The songwriting on the first half, the Beyoncé side, just doesn't really strike a chord with me outside If I Were a Boy.
If I were a boy, even just for a day.
I've always found Halo to be just like a little bit too much, a little bit like, I don't know, on the nose, I suppose, in terms of its inspirational mode. And then you flick to the Sasha Fierce side, which I think is stronger in my opinion. You have a single like Sweet Dreams, which is absolutely great.
What kind of dream can be a sweet dream or a beautiful nightmare?
but then a few singles that I think kind of missed the mark. I think one like Ego doesn't really work. Video Phone is kind of jarring even. I think that Diva does work for me and has kind of become a bit of a Beyonce anthem. And then also I really like Radio because she absolutely gets to belt. The song on this album that I think is the most underrated and the one that showcases a much more interesting direction that she could have gone in is Why Don't You Love Me, which actually has a co-write from her sister Solange, and I just think is much cooler and much more demonstrative of where she goes further into her career. So that is my number 8 album from Beyonce. In number 7, I'm going to go with her debut, Dangerously in Love. This is actually quite a different album from Beyonce in that it's the most R&B leaning one that she's ever made and one of the more genre cohesive records as well. And I think obviously she's stepping out of Destiny's Child. She's trying to make her mark, and she certainly does that with Crazy in Love, which becomes like one of the biggest singles of its time. And is just so known for that like blaring brass and the Jay-Z feature and the Beyonce strut in the music video. She really splashes through. But then the rest of the album is kind of low-key in how she showcases her vocals and her harmonies. And I really love that about it. I think that some of the singles are so expert. Naughty Girl and Me, Myself and I in particular just kind of take their time in exploring this beautiful, luscious R&B world. That she makes. And then Baby Boy, I think, is another great single. And I also think that there's great tracks across the album in general. That's how you like it. With Jay-Z, I really like. Dangerously in Love, the title track, which she brought back for the Renaissance tour, is also super, super impressive and just kind of a vocal masterclass, I think. And that's what this album is. I don't think it's Beyonce vocally at her strongest in terms of, I think she becomes a lot more daring and belts a lot more further into her career, but she really finds the nuances and she takes her time in exploring like the more melodic pockets of her voice. And that's what I think I appreciate this project for. I just think that it's her safest one. And I think that's purely because it was her first one and she was still learning exactly what she wanted from herself as a solo artist. But there's nothing wrong with this album, really. I think it's actually quite strong. And as far as debuts go, there's not many pop stars who have a debut as strong as Dangerously in Love, but you're going to see why I put it here because she just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And this is where I really started to struggle because on any given day, I could mix or match these 6. I could put them wherever. I think that they are 6 incredibly strong records. And I ended up landing on, and don't make me regret this, but I put B-Day at number 6. B-Day is obviously her second album, and I think was really a creative breakthrough for her. She took herself away and recorded it without many people knowing that she was doing it. It's her most cohesive record. It comes in at just 10 tracks, and it's all got this really soulful, funky, brass-led sound to it. I think that the lead single, Deja Vu, is incredible and one of her best songs. And I feel like as soon as you hear her like bringing in that bass on Deja Vu, you know that she has stepped into a different mode that she just simply wasn't giving us on Dangerously in Love. The confidence is brimming on this record. And I just love that she dared to do 10 songs. Obviously, she gives us the deluxe and it kind of ends up becoming a little bloated. And I actually think that that's what dims its effect a little bit for me now, is that I don't think the deluxe tracks are as strong. But as a 10-track record, this thing has such a high hit rate. Like every song just punches. Green Light has those kind of like brassy stabs to it. Even when she goes like a little bit slower, something like Sugar Mama has so much texture to it. And then Ring the Alarm, the second single. This absolute blaring of like total aggression that we'd never heard from Beyonce before. And that's where you start to really hear that growl in her voice too. I think that it is incredibly impressive record, and one that is so important for the development of her career, because I think it showed her what she could really do if she locked into what the Beyoncé sound is without considering what the sound is of anything else going on at the time. I don't think B-Day sounds like any other record that's out at the time that it's out, and that's something that she loses when she goes into I Am Sasha Fierce, but then makes her way back to it with the rest of her career. And to be honest, I would love to hear another 10-track album from Beyoncé, because I feel like she felt the pressure to just make every song worthwhile. And I think the only one she slips up on ends up being the album's biggest hit. Irreplaceable, a Stargate production. There was so much of that kind of music going around at the time. And I think that it dulls, I mean, it comes in quite late in the album, but it sort of dulls the momentum that she has from the beginning, because it just slips into a mode that is just not like the rest of the album. And then I think Resentment is not exactly like the rest of the album, but because of the way she delivers it and how it kind of matches the anger of Ring the Alarm, I think that it does fit on B-Day. If she got rid of Irreplaceable, it's basically a perfect album. I absolutely love B-Day. I think it's incredible. In number 5, I have gone with last year's Cowboy Carter. This is an album that I also really love. I think it successfully does the country thing without doing it in a gimmicky kind of way. I really liked Texas Hold'em, but when I heard it, I was like, this could end up being like her just cosplaying the country character without really going into it and exploring Beyonce's roots. Obviously, she was never going to do that because it's Beyonce and she's become a master at putting together an album that almost acts as a historical text alongside this sort of autobiographical work for her. And that's exactly what Cowboy Carter does. I think what it does so expertly is it rewrites some of the history of country music in terms of introducing so much that has been erased throughout country music's history, that has been rewritten by the white country performers who in many ways have kind of diluted the genre. She tells us about Linda Martell, who's a figure in country music who's been forgotten at so many points. Rhiannon Giddens playing the banjo on Texas Hold'em, and then following that up with education about the banjo and its black roots, I think is incredibly impressive. And there's that side of the album that's really dense in text and in history. But then there's the other side of the album, which I think is some of Beyonce's most vulnerable work. I think that we get to hear a lot about her history in a way that we hadn't really heard about it before on a song like 16 Carriages, which really details her struggle.
16 carriages driving away while I watch them ride with my dreams away.
I think on Flamenco, she's singing about something that I'm actually not entirely sure what she's singing about, but we're getting this level of vulnerability that I'm kind of not used to from her outside of Lemonade, which is obviously a record that we'll go on to talk about. I love Just for Fun, I think is incredibly dark as well. But then I think when it comes to the fun moments and for Beyonce just letting loose, she does that incredibly well too. Ya Ya, such a fun moment. Tyrant, incredibly fun. Bodyguard could have been the song of the summer if she really wanted it to be. And I think hearing her in kind of that almost bluesy rock and roll mode as well gives me a Beyonce that I'd never heard before. And I really like these exercises in genre for her, even though I don't think she sticks strictly to the genre. Putting these kind of parameters on herself, I think, forces her to unlock different parts of her personality and different parts of her artistry that we wouldn't see on just another Beyonce album. And I think that's the strength of Cowboy Carter. Where it slips up, I think, is where it feels this pressure to insert itself into the lineage of country music with artists like Dolly Parton. Jolene, that cover, I just think is not really that impressive. And I think the Blackbird cover, as much as I like it and doing it with the other black country artists like Tanner Adele and adding them into the fray, I think is nice and sweet, but they could have been on an original, I think, because I don't think Blackbird does anything for the story of the album. But another incredibly good record from Beyoncé, and one that I am very excited to see live when I see the Cowboy Carter tour in just a couple weeks. If you want to hear all about my experience there, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Let's go to number 4, and it couldn't be anything else but her record 4. Her 4th album. This is, I think, the start of Beyoncé's creative liberation in many ways. Before this record, she fires her dad as her manager and really takes things into her own hands. And you can hear that come together on this record, because compared to I Am Sasha Fierce, the one before, it is totally unconcerned with trends, and is the first record where I really start to see Beyoncé look towards her legacy. This is like a throwback soul record in many ways, like one of the more vintage sounding Beyoncé records that she's ever given us. But in doing that, it allows us to hear her voice in a way that we'd never heard it. And that's just with this like desperation and this yearning that just comes out and begins at track 1 with 1+1, maybe the best love song that she's ever written on, and just totally stripped back and raw, and that growl in her voice comes through. I think I remember an interview at the time where she was talking about how her vocals live had this feeling and this rawness to them that is kind of lost on the recorded product. And they found a way of tapping into that on this album, particularly on a song like I Care, which I think is one of the best songs that she's ever released, particularly when she goes to that vocal riff. And I think this album, coupled with that Glastonbury performance that she does around this time, ends up being the album where you really start to see the groundwork laid for Beyoncé being Beyoncé, like the untouchable legend. Obviously, we knew that she was special before this, but she was missing kind of that classic project and classic performance to really solidify that and make us understand it. And I think that by moving away from whatever was happening in contemporary pop and R&B music, she really found a way to stake her claim. This is a daring album. I think that it trips through a number of different things. It tries a number of different things, and not everything works. I think the sample of Major Lazer on Girls Run the World doesn't entirely land for me. And then there's some safer moments that she does with Ryan Tedder. I think a song like Start Over, which I feel like is good, but kind of safe compared to the rest of the record. I Was Here, that the final song as well, like kind of sees her leaning back into this like thing that Beyoncé had at that point, where she always felt like she had to sort of end the album with a ballad or do this really soppy ballad that I just don't think she has to do, because she's at her most exciting on this album when she's being totally daring, whether that be with the more vulnerable stuff or whether that be with the upbeat stuff. Countdown, End of Time, 2 of the best upbeat songs that she's ever done. And it's because she was just like so forthright in everything that she was doing. There's so much conviction to her delivery on this record. And I feel like I get to understand Beyoncé more as a person and a performer on this album more than ever before. It some days is my favorite Beyoncé album, but not today. It lands in number 4. Moving on to number 3, and this again, like putting these 3 in a rank was so difficult because I was splitting them with hairs. But in number 3, I'm going with Lemonade. This is an album that made Beyoncé even more of a legend than I think we thought that she could become. And that's because we'd seen visual albums from her before. Obviously, the music video has been an incredibly important part of Beyoncé's story. But here she manages to not only stitch it all together and give us this whole one body of work, but also do one that is so emotionally dense and so profound in what it's trying to say that it needed to have a visual that was equally as important as the music that it was giving, and she managed to deliver on that. I remember when she released this album, almost out of nowhere, I think we knew she had an HBO special coming up, but apart from that, we didn't really know what she was working on. We'd had Formation already, and she'd played the Super Bowl with Coldplay and Bruno Mars that year. But when you hear the first 2 songs, Pray You Catch Me and Hold Up, and you realize that something has gone on within the Beyoncé and Jay-Z relationship, which had been one that had been so airtight until the whole Solange Beyoncé Jay-Z elevator incident, to hear her addressing something like this, one of pop's most guarded stars, getting into it was quite a moment.
They don't love you like I love you. Oh, down, they don't love you like I love you. Something don't feel right because it ain't right, especially coming up after midnight.
I was actually at Coachella at the moment that this album dropped, and I remember everybody starting to like stare at their phones and the news sort of spreading bit by bit that Beyoncé had dropped a full album. And I honestly wanted to leave the festival at that point and just go home and listen. And I remember just trying to take it all in, everything that she was saying, being so lyrically raw and so lyrically exposed in a way that we never get from Beyoncé, but also tying it, I guess, all together historically as well, and not only speaking just about her experience in this marriage, but speaking about the experience of Black women in general, and trying to tell this story in a different way that I think was very revealing for audiences. Obviously, that's not something I can speak too much to, but I know that this is the moment that the Beyoncé text becomes denser. This is when she starts to feel like her purpose is greater than just making great music, but also rewriting history in some kind of way, and realizing that she does have the power to do that in this status that she's made for herself. But outside of that, the music as well is looser and more freeform than ever. I think she starts to play with that on the self-titled record, which is really where she becomes super daring. But on this one as well, it's none of this feels like conventional pop music. I think of a song like Sorry. I remember the first time I heard it and thinking like, there's no form here. Like I can't figure out what kind of song she's trying to make, or the hook is not landing for me or something. And then on repeat listens, it all starts to make sense to you.
Left a note in the hallway. By the time you read it, I'll be far away. I'm far away.
And I think particularly with a song like Hold Up as well, this is where you start to see how good Beyoncé is at making a mood board and taking bits and pieces from all different spots and different producers and songwriters. Like Hold Up comes from an Ezra Koenig tweet that gets merged with Soulja Boy, that gets merged with Father John Misty. Like there's just so much going on in this song, which I think is so cool. And I think that happens on so many moments in the album. But I also appreciate how she's able to put together so many genres. I mean, sound-wise, this could be her most wild record yet. You've got rock music on a song like Don't Hurt Yourself, country music on Daddy Lessons, straight up R&B on Love Drought, and then Formation goes into more of like a rap sound for Beyoncé. I know Beyoncé as rapper was something that was really being explored at the time, but she manages to pull it all together, stitch it together so tightly in this narrative-driven album, and it's truly like stunning the way she was able to tell the story on this record. I don't think there's a more vivid pop album, or pop, R&B, rock, whatever you want to call it. There's no more vivid record from this time in music. I just think it is so beautifully told, so expertly delivered, and something that only she could do. The only reason I put it at 3 is I just think the next 2 projects I'm going to talk about have the stronger songs at some points, even though I do think this album has some of her best work. I think All Night, Sorry, some of her best music ever. But it just felt like it had to go at number 3. I'll move on to number 2 and maybe it'll make some more sense why I've put Lemonade at number 3. But in number 2, it is her self-titled record, Beyoncé. This was the one that shook the world when she just dropped it out of nowhere, changed the game with that digital drop. And I think that was a real game changer, not only for pop music, because it just totally opened up the floodgates for the idea of the surprise album, which was such a big thing for the years that followed this record, but I also think it showed Beyoncé that she could just totally play by her own rules, and there was no reason for her to be following any kind of convention when it came to pop music. And obviously that has something to do with the release strategy of just dropping it out of nowhere with no singles and letting whatever rise to the top. But it's also true of the way that this album was put together and the many things that it does. I remember hearing Haunted for the first time, a song that goes for over 6 minutes, and has so many different beat changes and so many different melody changes as well. And I was like, wow, I've never heard Beyonce freer than this, and feeling like she could explore form in this way without having to worry about it being 3 or 4 minutes and being something that audiences could latch on to.
My honey loves ghost in the sheets.
Like, this album is so far from having a Love on Top or something like irreplaceable, something so conventional like that, because I think she was just so excited with the different sounds that she was hearing and the experimentation. It's why you get so many different producers over this album. It's why you get Frank Ocean on something like Superpower. You then get Caroline Polachek on something like No Angel. And then you also get, I'm trying to think, Drake.
On my mind, I passed my bedtime, no rest at the kingdom. Alone in my place, my heart is away. All that I can think of is we should get married. We should get married.
And obviously his production team on Mine, which she manages to mix together, like make that song so emotionally rich. Like you can feel the demo that Drake gave her for Mine. Like you know which parts are his, but then she adds that balladry at the beginning talking about the doubts that she has about having children and starting a marriage and all that kind of thing. And that's where she really starts to become a bit more daring lyrically. And I love that about it. It's also like a most like sexually liberated album in terms of songs like Jealous and Rocket too. I think Rocket just takes it to a place that we really hadn't heard her before vocally, like kind of in her D'Angelo Untitled How Does It Feel bag, and absolutely killing it on a song like Blow. You know that Pharrell's brought her a demo that's kind of like okay, but she takes it to the stratosphere when she adds in that breakdown at the end.
I can't wait till I get home so you can tear that cherry out.
And I feel like that's what makes this album so exciting, is you never know where it's going to go track-wise. They always have such a different path, and every time you think she's going to go right, she goes left. And also, I feel like Beyonce as rapper becomes really apparent on this record with a song like Flawless, which inspires t-shirts everywhere. And I feel like it's really cool that this album was exploring so much sonically and doing so many daring and experimental things, but at the same time, it managed to capture the zeitgeist at the exact right moment. Drunken Love ends up becoming a huge hit off this record.
Can I keep my fingers off you, baby? I want you. Nah, nah.
I think XO does a good job at becoming kind of the straight down the line pop record of this. And obviously Flawless as well becomes this sort of viral moment for her, even furthered when Nicki Minaj jumps on the remix and does something really special here. So even though she was doing so much stuff that shouldn't have worked in a commercial sense, it ends up doing it by pure fact that it's Beyonce doing it. And this is the first record where that happens, because you've got to remember that 4 doesn't do that great commercially. It's kind of her flop record if she does have one of those. But this one, I think she steps into her status as Beyonce and just takes the reign and is like, this is going to be popular because it's Beyonce, not because it sounds like anything else that's popular. And I love that about this album. And I also don't think we can talk about this album without talking about songs like Heaven, and also the fact that it's her first album since Blue being born, and there's kind of that tenderness and that motherhood that she brings to the album as well, while also not giving up her own sort of like, I don't know, that sexiness that like Beyonce brings to any project, which I think is really cool here. And I even like the deluxe edition of Self-Titled when she adds a song like 7-Eleven. I just think she was on such a creative run at this point, and I love it. In number 1, you've probably already guessed it by now, but I am going with 2022's Renaissance. This is her house music or dance record, if you like. And the reason why I put this here is because I think that it combines many of the things that I like about all the other albums that I've mentioned and manages to pull off every different element of Beyonce. It's historical. It's reclaiming house music. It's showcasing the impacts that the Black queer community has had on house music, on ballroom music, on so many different types of electronic music. And it's telling the story of that all through kind of the lens of her late uncle, Uncle Johnny. And so it has that side of it. It's weighty. It's like a weighty text in that way. But at the same time, it's this absolutely emancipating, liberating listen that's as daring a Beyoncé record as she can make, and just takes us on a ride from start to finish. And you could not take out a single little bit of this album because it is stitched together so perfectly from start to finish that you almost feel like you can't listen to songs individually from this album because it works so well as a whole. It's mixed together. Each song flows from one to the other. When you start with I'm That Girl, it almost feels like it's a plane taking off and you're about to be taken to the stratosphere for an hour or for whatever the runtime of this is. It's incredibly fun. A song like Cuff It.
I feel like falling in love. I'm in the mood to fuck something up.
One of the loosest songs that she's ever made, just having an absolute celebration. And I also feel that on songs like Heated as well, when she moves into that final bit at the end where she's just talking absolute nonsense in the best way. Like, that's Beyoncé unhinged in a way that we've never heard her before.
Tip, tip, tip on hardwood floors. 10, 10, 10 across the board. Face, yeah. Your face card never declines, my God.
And she brings that kind of energy to the whole record, which I absolutely love. I also love that it's like a personal record too. I think The Dream has talked about how Break My Soul in particular is about something that Beyoncé went through that she's not necessarily ready to talk about, but she puts it on this like 90s, early 2000s Robin-esque Show Me Love house beat and like deals with it on the dance floor, which I think is what so much good house and electronic music is about. It's about working through those emotions on the dance floor and finding that euphoria. And I think she captures that so beautifully.
You won't break my soul. 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 I'm telling everybody.
On this record, I think she also does it on a song like Church Girl, where she starts off by singing, I've been up, I've been down, feels like I move mountains, but then just decides to sort of twerk it out in the chorus. Like, I think that it matched the mood of almost the world when it came out in 2022. We'd all just come out of lockdown. We were back out of the house and ready for a dance record, but everyone had a lot of shit to work through. And I feel like this album is total catharsis. When it came out, I remember they were doing a lot of Renaissance club nights, particularly here in New York, and I went to several of them. I would say like upwards of 5. And every time this album started, the energy was just totally electric and everyone was locked in for the full 16 songs of this album. And that is just so rare of any album for this to happen, because often an album, like I think I've spoken with many of these records that I've talked about while ranking them, that there's always 1 or 2 songs that will pull you out of it. There's not a single song that pulls you out of Renaissance. You're in that world for the whole time. And I honestly just love every second of this record. And I think when I talked about Beyoncé, the self-titled record, being where she started to learn to pull all different inspirations together and present it as the Beyoncé sound, well, this is just her showing how much of a master she's become at it, because she does it once again. A song like Heated, like I said with mine, you can hear the Drake demo in that, but she takes it to such a different place. You can tell on a song like Alien Superstar that she's pulled a little bit from here and then pulled a little bit from there, that she's heard a sample that she feels like needs to be in there, but she's heard another part that a producer's been working on and put it together. It's this ultimate pastiche of different sounds from the electronic world put together with such a expertise would be the word that I should use. Put together with such an expertise that I don't think any other living artist has right now. And I truly mean that. I don't think this record could be made by anybody else, because I don't think that any other artist or pop star has the ear for stitching things together in such a Frankenstein way that Beyoncé does. And I think that that's her biggest legacy. And that's what annoys me when people talk about, why does she have 70 writers on the track or whatever? And it's because she is referencing so many different things. She's pulling in so many different samples. And that's the way that she is able to tell the history of this genre of music while also making it sound fresh and very Beyoncé. And I think that that is Renaissance's biggest strength, is that it is able to put so much in the pot, and yet it all comes out as this one cohesive record that is just totally unskippable from start to finish. It is my number one Beyoncé album. I know that many of you are going to have plenty of thoughts about this, and I welcome it. I encourage it. Let's get into the Discord and let's talk further about this ranking, about what you think the number one Beyoncé album is. But for me, I feel happy with this 8. One of my favorite artists of all time, one of the strongest discographies in pop music. I would maybe say the strongest discography by an artist of the 21st century. And you can't really go wrong with a Beyoncé album. So let me know what your number one is. You can also drop it in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or drop it in the comments on Spotify as well, and we can duke it out. On the next episode of the Pop Pod, I have got an interview with an artist who's written several number one records for Katy Perry. She's also written a number one record for Britney Spears. She's written with Kelly Clarkson. She has also written with Kesha, and she's also been more recently working with a number of artists as the recession pop trend comes back. She's an incredible songwriter and artist in her own right, and I'm looking forward to having her on the next episode. Until then, let's get in the comments about this Beyoncé ranking. Come and join me in the Discord if you haven't already. Don't forget, if you've got a hot take or anything that you would like aired on the podcast, send that to thepoppod@popsamcam.com. I'll drop that email in the comments if you want to do that. Make sure you like or subscribe if you're not already. See you next time.